Welcome into the Low Man Help podcast. We are back and joined today by the one and only Matt Moore. Matt, thank you so much for being with us today. You're blessing us with the knowledge on award season, something you're a veteran of, and we're really appreciative to have you here.
Hey man, always happy to come on. I spend more time thinking about awards than any person should, so I'm always excited for another opportunity to talk about it and get these thoughts out of my brain.
It feels like on Twitter, I don't know who is the leader. If I had to put like a rating on it, it seems like you and Andy Bailey are the two that fight off the most battles during award season on Twitter. Do you feel that? Does it weigh on you?
Yeah, so I mean, my approach to Twitter is always that like everybody's opinion is worth considering, even if we're going to eventually like expose why it's problematic or try and remove bad actors. For me, it's when I was working at CBS Sports and having to cover stuff in so much detail every day because we were doing aggregation that's just post after post. You can't get around MVP. You'll write about MVP 10 times in a week just by sheer when the news comes up. And so I kind of came to the conclusion of you can go two ways. You either have to like be like these awards are subjective and stupid and I don't care about them. That's totally fine. I have no problem with anybody that takes that approach and just focuses on the game. The other, I think, is to go the whole way and to just be like, I want to understand this as much as possible and I want to try and come to as close to the most correct and most accurate answer as possible. And I chose that way. So I chose to care about these things in part because like the MVP in particular, this is the history of the league. Like the history of the league is traceable through the history of the MVP award. This is a players league. And if it's gonna be a players league and MVP is the determination of, the most important player that season from a regular season perspective, I think it really matters. And so I've decided to go that way. And on Twitter, my biggest thing is I really genuinely don't care who you come down on if your argument is good. Because I think that focusing on that helps us to have better conversations about it. If we're able to have better conversations with better arguments, we can let the strongest arguments go up against each other and then everyone can decide what they think. This year in particular, I don't think there's a right answer for MVP. Sometimes I think there is. This year, I don't think there's a right answer for MVP between the two leading candidates, but I do care that there are good and bad arguments you can make about them.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I don't know that I would have the mental acuity, or maybe more so the emotional acuity, to deal with the Twitter volume that you do when it comes to this. It's unbelievable how much you put into it. It's really cool. I love reading your stuff. I'll scroll through and just like look at your timeline and look at all the retweets that you go back and forth with. And it's awesome. When we talk about the awards and MVP, because you mentioned this last time, it is a story of the league. And so much of when I look at these awards, and I was on with Tim Legler yesterday, and he talked about it as well, it's really about how you define it. And it's subjective based on how you define the award and what it means to you, what you deem is valuable, what you deem is valuable on the court, and then not only what you deem is the award as, like, is it the best player, is it the most valuable player, how do you define value, all those other things. And he talked about how it's so subjective, and it really is. It's a representation of what you view as valuable to the game of basketball and in terms of winning. And so all the other awards too, most improved, sixth man, all of them, they coach of the year, they all have the same thing where you have these characteristics about them where the narrative can be shaped based on the definition that you believe the award to be. So we're going to talk about 5 awards. We're on MVP, MIP, sixth man of the year, coach of the year, and executive of the year. And these are my 5 favorite ones. These are the ones that I feel like are the ones that are really the story of the league. And I lean into these the most. So MVP right now, right off the jump, we've got a 2-horse race, and all these odds are from FanDuel. They currently have SGA sitting at minus 4,000 and Jokic sitting at plus 1,000, which is just, it feels like the betting public in the gap in terms of the structure of where they're at in terms of the odds couldn't be further away from guys that you would think are going to be closer. And last thing is the straw poll from ESPN from Bontemps was at, the last one was at 73 for SGA, first place votes 23 for Jokic. So a little bit closer maybe than this, but not so close. Where do you come down on this? Who is your MVP? Why are they your MVP? Give me the Matt Moore spiel on MVP this year.
It's one of the closest that I've had in terms of my determination since probably 2017. which I think is an all-timer for trying to decide. I finally come down on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It is very, very close. I don't consider previous seasons or career context. So I'm not one that's like, well, we got to give it to this guy because he's got, he needs another one. There, if you do consider multi-year and you consider careers, Jokic's, I think, is like, it's very hard to get around it. And the reason is, if Jokic has won 3 and this is his best season, are we really saying that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's season is better than the best Nikola Jokic season? I think that's a very, very high bar to clear. But when I get into the details of how I view it, which is it's a resume-based award from October through April, and I look at the overall impact, and I look at the amount of winning, a lot of this gets into Jokic might impact the amount of winning the Nuggets do more. But Shai has led to more winning overall. And
is that kind of how you define it?
Yeah, it's like a distinction. So like the base thing that I came to a couple of years ago on valuable is, my question is, who impacts winning the most? And so this is, Jokic might impact the level of winning that he does more than Shai does, but Shai impacts the most winning the most. And that distinction is very, very narrow.
Yeah.
Jokic's defensive fall off between January and March was a significant factor. Where this is probably, in my opinion, the worst defensive Jokic season since 2019. And as somebody that does value defense, and I do think that that's often used as a proxy, people are like, well, I value defense. And that's why it's most of the time, that's just, I don't like Jokic. That's all that is. It's not anything to do with it, because I'm like, have you actually sat down and watched all the defensive clips? Well, no. Then you don't know. Then you have no idea. Then you're just basing it off of one guy's a wing and one is a slow plotting center. I can tell you when Jokic has had really great defensive seasons. I can tell you the great defensive games that Jokic has had this season. I can tell you the things that Jokic has been really good at this season. I can also tell you that his defensive effort has been poor. He doesn't trap at the level to put enough pressure on the ball handler to deter the weak side swing pass to the corner or the short roll. He doesn't play effective enough in drop to contest at the rim and protect it. He does not make enough of an impact on contested shots at the rim, particularly on offensive rebound opportunities. His defensive rebound numbers are incredible, but also the defensive rebounding impact has been less this season. So, like, I have all the evidence I need to be able to be like, yeah, no, I feel good about this assessment that Jokic's defense has been so subpar that it does make up for the difference between Jokic and SGA offensively and impact. The SGA has been amazing. Jokic is having what might be the best offensive season in history. If we had an offensive player of the year award, Mark, like, is there any question it's Jokic? Like, would we even think about it for more than 30 seconds?
I don't think so. I mean,
No.
I don't think so. It is interesting though that you say that, and a lot of and this is solely like, I feel MVP it's the most talked about award on national broadcast, and people with the biggest microphone talk about this award. So this award to me gets shaped so much by that narrative. So it is interesting to me to think about, if there was an offensive award, it would be no question to Jokic in what you just said, or what the national media would say. But SGA's scoring and his offense is highlighted so much by those same people. So it would seem like that would be like a Chinese finger trap or something like that they would kind of get caught in. But when I think about SGA, he is leading the league in points, 32.8 a game. And his roundabout numbers, I'll just give them both for SGA and Jokic: 32.8, 5 rebounds, 6.3 assists, first in scoring, 1.7 steals, fourth in the league in steals. Shooting splits 52, 37.3, 90.1, like pretty close to a 50-40-90, which is incredible. Effective field goal 56.9. His volume, his shooting volume to me is something that I've looked at in terms of last season of 3-point shots and how they come in the mix. I've loved that he started to put that together in terms of shooting more volume. I think that's something you look at in the offseason and you say, like, if I want to get to the place I want to get to, I need this in the arsenal. 21.7 shots a game, 5.7 from 3, 9 free throws. On twos, he shoots about 16 a game and 57.2%. So his numbers really jump out at you. And it's something that's harped at as the offense is such a big deal. When you go to the Jokic side, and I can run through them real quick so we can dive in more, 29.7 a game, 12.8 rebounds, 10.2 assists, top three in all those in the league. Shooting splits 57.5, 41.6, 80.3. So again, another guy pretty close to 50, 40, 90. Like he's got 2 out of 3. Effective field goal 62.5. And the volume to me, the fact that he's scoring less, 3 points less than SGA, 3.1. He's shooting 19.6 shots, 4.7 threes, and only 6.6 free throws. 15 twos a game at 62.5%. I know that the scoring and the offense is, SGA's first and people lean on that a lot, but it does feel like to me it's kind of a crutch because it doesn't feel like SGA is even close to the offensive level. Right. And then the defensive stuff, I know that there's stuff to harp on with Jokic, but he's up there in steals ahead of SGA at 1.8, third in steals. And deflections, he's up in the top 8. I think last time I checked, he was 6. And so there's something to be said also about how do you parcel out the defensive credit for Oklahoma City, who has the best defense in the league and who has unbelievable defenders with Caruso, Dort, Wallace, Wiggins, all these, Chet, Hartenstein, all these guys that provide cover, provide, things to put him down the level, and their defensive schemes are a little bit more cohesive than the Nuggets. Like the Nuggets, when you were talking about Jokic up at the level, if you look at the Minnesota game or the Boston game early, when they are in these certain pick and roll coverages where he comes to the level and there's a 2-eye that the ball is going towards, so 2 offensive players, they will bring low man help from that side and allow passes. Nickeil Alexander-Walker got a wide open 3. Tatum got White and Braun a 3. So like there are some coverages where that has nothing to do with him, but it's going into his defensive stats. So to me, I fall on the Jokic side of this, and I don't actually think it's particularly close. I'll dig into a few more things like after I hear from you, but like when you hear the numbers, like what jumps out at you is like, you're an SGA guy on this. So like when you hear the Jokic stuff, where do you kind of fall on that of leaning into the defense is the separator when you can't really like parcel out so much defensive credit?
So I think one thing to consider, and this is like a big thing I had to come to, is you have to, if you do this, if you go deep enough on this, you have to accept there are going to be some things that are unfair about awarding the MVP. Okay. Mavericks fans had a hard time with this last year because they were like, but if it weren't for the injuries, and I'm like, but they happened. Like, I'm sorry. And that sucks. But that's part of it. Like, it doesn't mean that Luka's not on the level. If you're like, is Luka an MVP level player? Absolutely. So Luka should win MVP. No. Why? Because the team wasn't good enough. But it wasn't his. Nope. It wasn't good enough. And that's a lot of where this gets to with Jokic is. So another stat in your favor. I have a lot of stats that can help Jokic. I'm writing the case for him here after I finish up Shai's defensive stuff today. Is if you take 25% usage, 40 games played, 30 minutes a game. So your standard superstar levels. It's you got to play enough games, you got to have the ball in your hands enough, and you got to play enough minutes. And you do those and you sort it by offensive rating. So on court, whose offense is the best? What are the results of that? So Shai scores all this and is so efficient. Jokic scores and passes and is so efficient. Whose offense is better? And the answer is the Nuggets. The Nuggets have the highest offensive rating amongst any player when Jokic is on the court. That's not surprising. That to me, I think, is why Jokic is probably closer than the odds suggest, because a lot of people are going to come to that conclusion, whether they see that number or not. They'll come to that conclusion and be like, and this, I think, is a really important one, because if you say, does Shai impact the game more on offense or on defense? Everyone's going to say offense. Okay, so he's got Dort and Caruso and Case and Wallace and all those guys, right?
Yeah.
And so if Shai impacts the offense more and Jokic impacts the offense more, and Jokic's offensive performance is better both quantitatively and in terms of team overall performance, how is it not Jokic? That's an airtight, incredibly sound argument to make for Nikola Jokic. And I do not have an objection based off of that for voting for Jokic. The problem is, and like this is like one of the things where I do this to such an unrealistic degree that it's just you can't ask other people to do what I do. Mark,
Mhm.
like I sat down and I watched every Shea offensive possession, all of them. I watched them all out
Mhm.
of order. I do it in random order so I don't get sucked into the flow of the game, which I think can often actually times like it can impact you negatively because you're like, God, they were down and he just like led this comeback. I want to know like possession by possession over the course of the season what happens. I'm doing the
Ooh,
same thing with him
interesting.
defensively. And I'm doing the same thing with him defensively to be like, what is he good at? What is he bad at? Where does he struggle? Where does he make an impact?
Oh my god, can I say I don't like that? Am I allowed to? I think it's
Yeah, it's
interesting.
totally fine. Yeah.
That what and only one question because I want to hear more and I want to give you some on-off steps, but like in terms of watching them out of order, do you watch them out of order for the whole season or for the particular game? And then I have a follow-up question.
I have watched them out of order for the entire season.
For the entire season. Do you ever feel like one thing to me is like I love when guys figure out kind of like the next gears
Mm-hmm.
in the process. So something that I would like always enjoy is like when you watch somebody work through the gears of like, okay, this is the coverage they're going with this time. I'm going to go ahead and go with this option. It
Yep.
didn't work. Let me get to the next layer. Then I'm going to get to the next layer. So like seeing those out of order, I feel like you wouldn't get the same like narrative of within the game of like how this
Yep.
player is seeing the process. And one thing I do love about Shea is when I watch him, and it takes a certain level of maturity, a certain level of trust in your teammates to accept the double teams when he gets them out further away, to continuously make pocket passes in terms of finding the right space and not make escape passes that are
Yep.
parallel or behind. So like I love that about him. And so like watching him out of order, I feel like maybe with like give me a little
Yep.
bit less of like, oh man, I'm not really seeing his commitment to the
Yeah.
team as much.
So some of that is I watched five. I can't remember. I have them logged here somewhere, but
Mm-hmm.
I watched 5 games like independently. I try and do
Yeah.
like 5 games in order on top of this work to
Okay.
try and get a sense for that of both his
Yeah.
best and some of his like toughest performances on a big stage. So
Yeah.
like watch the Wolves loss, right?
Right.
And then this is on top of all the stuff that you do
Which
during the
one?
season where I've got like that anecdotal evidence. So you lean on kind of that. The reason I like doing it out of order is you will pick up on different tendencies and you'll actually notice stuff because you'll do so many of these. You'll be like, oh, that's weird because I watched this one from the first quarter
Yeah.
and this happened. And then in the fourth quarter, like this, you learn so much. And actually, I think it helps to do the out of order stuff because you're able to see so many possessions where it's like, oh, they ran drop and he hit a pull up jumper. And then you see the one where it's like, oh, they blitzed him and this is what he did.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
oh, they brought that shrink help from above the break here to try and put another pressure on him. How he adjusted that. So you learn like all these intricacies. It's also great for me, honestly, because I learned so much about defenses. Like
Mm-hmm.
you learn so much about these other guys. Like I have notes and notes of like, here's all the things the Charlotte Hornets are doing well, but they just
Yeah.
like are dumb in these one particular like Charles Lee's doing a really good job, but um I find that that if you do this level of work that you kind of come to understand like the real intricacies of their game to
Sure.
be able to understand what makes them great because like those
Yeah.
broad numbers I honestly think like it misses a lot of it. Like if you ask me why is Shea MVP, my first and beginning thing is for like the beginning and end is you can't stop him. You cannot stop him from driving. He has the step on you no matter what. And if you try and make the adjustments that work on most guys, he will either draw a foul or he will get the edge on you.
Let me ask you about this because I was on cleaning the glass, and I think that's all incredibly interesting. I like the process of it. There's no doubt that you put the time and energy into it, which like to me, no matter what side you fall on, like if there's time and energy and thought process put into it, and you can connect the dots of how you feel about it, nothing else really matters. Like
Right.
you're everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I was on cleaning the glass because like to me, the most interesting thing is how you define value. Like what is the definition of value in this? Like, and you brought it up of like your team winning more like matters if all these things are considered. You contribute to the most amount of winning possible. So like I think that's interesting, and I think it's one thing that like leads in Shea's favor. So I looked at both of their on-off numbers on cleaning the glass, and there's some interesting stuff. They're about the same in possessions on and possessions off. So like generally in the same vicinity, plus or minus a couple hundred. And so SGA on plus 17, Jokic on plus 11.5, right? Offensive rating, Jokic is about 4 points higher. Defensive rating, SGA about 9 points lower, almost 10. Net rating, SGA plus 17, Yoke plus 11.5, right? But then when you get to them off the court, Thunder, 113, they'd be the 21st best offense in the league. Denver, 106.6, they'd be the second worst offense in the league, just ahead of Washington. Defense, 116 for Denver, they'd be the 25th worst defense. Thunder, defense, 106.3, they'd be the best defense in the league because their defense is the only defense better than that, right? Denver, minus 9.2 net, they'd only be better than Washington again, 29th in the league. Oklahoma City's net rating 6.7. They'd be the third best team in the league because Cleveland and Boston would be the only teams other than them above them. So if this team would be the third best team in the league when he's off the court, and the difference between Jokic's on-off numbers, he's a net plus 20.6. Yeah. 20.6. SGA's net 10.4. If his team would be the third best team in the league by net rating and the best defense in the league, how is there any question about value?
Okay. So,
educate me.
I am very passionate about this point, and it is the hardest one for me to convince people of, but I believe this, and I've had to be like, it's fine if we disagree on it instead of like, this is an immutable truth. Is it Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's responsibility or fault? Can he impact in any way what happens when he's not on the court?
Absolutely not.
Can he impact or control what happens when Jokic is not on the court?
Absolutely not. Well, only if they're playing.
It is not Shai's fault they put a better team around him. You cannot punish a guy for having good teammates, in part because your play should lift everybody up. That's how it should work. Jokic, the Denver Nuggets chose to enter the season with 2-3 backup center options. DeAndre Jordan at age 36, Zeke Naji on the very fringes and having lost all of his confidence, both by the locker room and the training staff or the coaching staff, and Dario Saric, who everyone believed in. They got 5 games in and decided Dario can't play. That is not because of how good Jokic is. That is because of how the roster was built. They entered the season with fringe second-round players filling out a bare-bones roster, in part because of the CBA. Like, that's how the Nuggets were built. If we talk about how good or how important a player is, and if you want to define it as, I want to define valuable as how important are you for your team, having Jokic based off of that principle is totally fair. But one, if you take off the other 3 offensive players for OKC, if you take off J-Dub, Wiggins, I believe, and Chet, the numbers are something like the offense with Shai is still top tier. Mm-hmm. And like the numbers for Jokic are still top tier if you take Murray and MPJ off. And that's always been the case because Jokic really is a one-man offense. But you can't use the on-off differential because those players don't get to control that. They control how good the team is when they are on the court. And this gets back to my central thing is if we're going to use net ratings, which I do believe in, like I use on-off as a descriptor for evaluating performance all the time. Mm-hmm. But with Shai on the court, think about what you said. They win by 17 points for every 100 possessions. That's insane. When Shai's on the court, they don't beat teams. They don't kill teams. They don't destroy teams. They annihilate them from the face of the basketball planet. And when Jokic's on the floor, they beat teams by double digits because that's how good he is, and that's how much of an MVP candidate he is. But that's the key here really is 17 points per 100 possessions minus 11 points per 100 possessions is a 6-point differential. And how do you balance out how much better the offense is with Jokic versus how much better the defense is with Shai and their contributions to those in order to explain that 6-point gap? It's easy. It's not easy. It is very possible to be like, here is why. that difference doesn't matter because Jokic does X, Y, and Z, and Shea doesn't do A, B, and C defensively to demonstrate the gap in those two teams. I come down on the other side of it where there is enough of a gap between them for me to be like, no, Shea has contributed to more winning. But that equation you can actually use as a proxy for explaining it, because even if we remove the numbers, you would still get to this point because it's like the anecdotal conversation of Jokic's offense is great, but Shea's a much better defender. And figuring out the calibration between those two, I think, leads you to your decision on MVP.
Interesting. I can't get there, but interesting.
That's okay.
Well, one of my favorite Shea stats, and then we're going to move on. He's on pace. I saw this on Basketball Reference. On pace for 69 games of at least 20 minutes without a single minus, without a single net negative for a game. Except, I don't know if you know this, but he had one this year. They refused to count it.
Really?
He had a minus 17. 21 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 turnovers, 33% from the floor, 22% from 3. Just an absolute egg. But they won't count it.
Why won't they count it? Oh, it's the Bucks game.
The only game where he saw playoff defense. The game where it just meant more. It was for the cup. An absolute egg. Minus 17, but they won't count it. So anyways, we're moving on. That's the differentiating factor if you need it. Most improved player, next one. This is my favorite one. Worked with guys whenever they showed up on this list at the end for receiving votes. Felt incredible. It was one of those things where I saw the work that went in behind the scenes, stuff like that. It was always really nice to see those guys appreciated and respected on the list. This year, again, this one comes down to like how you define it. JJ had a really nice rant yesterday or the day before about it's just become like give it to the number one pick, the max guy who's going to be another max guy that's actually done it. I fall on the side of it's a lot more difficult when a front office and a coaching staff aren't tied to their job security of you making it. And so if a number one pick is on your roster and they bust, well, you're done. Your job security does not exist versus like if a guy who's like a mid-tier pick or second round pick or undrafted like ends up breaking through. I think it's a lot harder to gain more of a role that way, more trust from a coaching staff, and to get over that hump than it is when everybody is really like locked in on you've had the same role the whole time. You're just actually able to do it. And we've wanted you to do it so badly the whole time that we've turned the other way and like pray to the basketball gods that it'll happen. So that's where I stand on it. Odds from FanDuel. Dyson Daniels minus 250, the favorite. Cade Cunningham in the JJ Redick vein, plus 170. Austin Reeves, and now it just seems like a two-horse race, but they still put some odds up. Austin Reeves plus 7,500. Christian Braun plus 10,000. Mobley plus 20,000. Tyler Herro plus 20,000. I mean, just like out of left field numbers here. A two-horse race from FanDuel. Where do you come down on this? And before I give you that, let me give you the favorite Dyson Daniels. This year, he is plus 8.3 points better, plus 1.9 rebounds, plus 1.7 steals better, plus 1.6 assists better, and plus 1.0 true shooting better. Who's your pick for most improved?
First, I want to start with an important piece of information, which is most improved player, like the other odds. When we look at the odds on FanDuel, you should consider these a reflection of the betting market, along with some synthesis of a bookmaker. Cade Cunningham took an insane amount of money out of the blue about a month and a half ago. Just like an incredible push on the handle.
Do we know?
We do not know the amount.
Single bettors or just like a collective?
It was a group. So there are groups that do this, that they work together, and then they sometimes will give it out to clients, or some other guys will tail them because they'll see it. They'll be made aware of it. There was like a coordinated Cade push. Okay. And we've actually been talking about this a lot on Buckets, my Action Network podcast, about the impact that this can have, because this is a great example of it. Yeah. Like if you start the conversation with who are on the odds board, right, it's supposed to be a reflection of public perception, right, versus what people actually think. And Dyson has pushed ahead in part because like Bill Simmons, Zach Lowe came out and said Dyson would be his pick.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, like everybody rushes because he's a plus number. But then the book's handle gets out of whack again. So now they got to move Dyson to minus 250, and now Cade's a plus number.
Right.
The reality, I think, for this award is like it's so nebulous, and this is one that I think could actually be damaged by the betting market in terms of people being like, "Well, it's got to be one of these guys. They're at the top
Right.
of the." Does it? Because I'll tell you, my guy the entire year, my guy has been Tyler Herro. It's been
Oh.
Tyler Herro from start to finish.
Ooh.
When we talk about because you mentioned like
Give it to me
number
here.
one
Give me the sell here for Tyler Hero. I'm intrigued.
number when we talk about this of like guy that you're expecting to be great, right?
Right.
And I think that's a really awesome point you made about the front office and coach are tied to whether this player succeeds or not versus like Dyson was a throw in a trade and then all of a sudden like he worked his way into that starting unit. And I think
Mm-hmm.
Dyson's a fine choice for that based on that
Mm-hmm.
perspective. Because coming into the year, it was literally the problem I have is that my bias towards these players winds up being who surprised me the most. Who did I think was like just a guy who it's like, no, he's really good.
I covered Australia, the Boomers for the Olympics. Shout out the pick and roll, Adam Webby. And I was on the Dyson train from the start because what he did for the Boomers was going to be his role in Atlanta. It was what they wanted DeJounte Murray to do. Like I wrote about it at the beginning of the year. I was in on Atlanta for their total over, and he was the reason why, because he's just got this thing that you absolutely want next to Trey. And then he's awful on the ball in like the scope of like a top 10 pick that's drafted to be so in the context of that, like that's not him. And if you're expecting him to be that, he's never going to be that. But what he's great at is cutting. He's a one over the Olympics. It just shined through with the test games, the lead up games, the Olympics. He's a wonderful cutter. He knows exactly where to be. He's an incredible finisher when he makes those cuts. And he was getting more and more comfortable with it's okay if I make or miss a shot on a spot up like opportunity. If it's a long closeout, I have to shoot this, and it's going to lead to more and more things. And I think there was a mindset change there. And so like I was in on Dyson before the year started. Like I loved what I saw from him, and everything he's done there has been exactly what he did with the Boomers. And it felt like that was going to be kind of like the thing that he had going for him.
So, and I think it's great, and I think Dyson's a perfectly fine choice, and Dyson would have to be either second or third on my vote. Tyler was a constant target of trade rumors. Are they going to move him? Are they going to not move him? He's not good enough. What happened to him? Is he better than Tyrese Maxey? I still think he'd probably take Maxey. Is he better than Anthony Simons? That was a conversation. All these types of things. And then this year, with all of the Jimmy Butler nonsense happening, with everything else going on, on a team where Bam Adebayo had an extremely down year relative to expectations, Tyler's been the best player on a playoff team. He has been the best player on a playoff team. That is extremely difficult to do. He's number one on the scouting report.
Does he play for somebody other than Miami? Am I missing? Are they a playoff team? Am I missing something?
They'll get there.
Have you seen the Fighting Josh Giddies yet?
Hey, I think Orlando's making it. Orlando's not the
Kobe
one I
White. Great
about.
day to be a Tar Heel. Like they are not in the playoffs yet, and they have severely underperformed.
Have they?
Absolutely. I go by when it comes to underperformed, I go by what Vegas says. And if Vegas says that you're supposed to win 44 games, and you are plus or minus 1 or 2 from that number, you've done about right. If you are more than plus or minus 5 of that number, you have either overperformed or underperformed. And they are quite a bit away from that number.
I mean, but we know why. Jimmy Butler detonated their season. He detonated their season.
He had to do what Jimmy had to do for Big Face Coffee to thrive on the West Coast. It was all about expansion. But go ahead, tell me why about Herro, because I do enjoy Herro. I love that he can play on or off the ball as a shooter. I think one of the more difficult things to do in the NBA that people don't really appreciate is there's 5 different shots that you can shoot in the NBA. You can shoot closeout shots like spot up. You can shoot off the pick and roll. You can shoot off the DHO. You can shoot off isolations, and you can shoot off pin down screens. And those are like flares and screens and things like that. And they all take different types of footwork, and they all take being able to find rhythm and balance with the basketball and your body at the right time to be able to shoot it from 24, 25, 26 feet away. And one of my favorite things about him is he can shoot all 5 of those shots. And there's only like a handful of guys that can shoot all 5 of those at a high level from their shooting profile. And he's got that. And it's one of my more favorite things about him as a player.
I think that he's been much sharper. I think his decision making has been better. I think that, you know, like I can point to the career high in assists, but like that's going to be tied to more touches, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to try and like shortcut my way through it. I think just from watching him, I see him as a smarter player. He's eliminated a lot of the shots in his shot diet that maybe in previous past it was like testing the boundaries.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is when you are the number one option, you get more leeway, but that means also the responsibility is higher, especially for a team like Miami. If Bam's not going to be the all-around mega force that they have paid him and expected him to be, how are you possibly going to find yourself into even the play-in, even in the East?
Yeah.
It takes what Tyler's given him.
I love seeing him thrive. For me, I'm going Christian Braun. I think what he's done in Denver, plus 7.9 points, plus 1.9 rebounds, or 1.5, plus 1 assist. But to me, when I think about Christian and I think about filling into the KCP role and I think about improvement, a lot of times it comes with like, what did the actions look like for you before? What did the volume look like for you before? What do the percentages look like now? And so like some of the jumps, 11 and a half field goal percentage jump, slight 3-point percentage jump, like nothing to even be significant. Free throws up 13.1%, effective field goal up 10%. But the volume jumps, field goals almost 2x, threes about 50% more, same thing, free throws about 50% more. And to me, it's more about like the actions that he was in before were not the actions that he's in now. He was in find some junk when you can pick it up, get out in transition. And it's not that like it's completely different where he's on the ball, but Jokic has this thing, and I talked to Adam about it and Danny. Jokic has this thing where he lets you know very clearly who he trusts and who he doesn't trust out there. And he completely trusts Christian. And whether it's inverted pick and rolls, knowing how to slip them, whether it's getting to DHO actions and actually like getting the ball from Jokic, because a lot of times Jokic will just send people through. If he like Torrey Craig was the guy where he would just be like, get out of here. Like this is an empty corner post up for me now. And so seeing Christian play with Jokic, seeing him evolve in that setting, seeing Jokic build like a trust for him, I think obviously Jokic is going to raise all tides when it comes to offensive numbers if you're playing minutes with him. But there was an opportunity for Peyton Watson to get a chance at that spot at some point, right? There was an opportunity for Julian Strawther to get an opportunity at that point at some time, like if he faltered. And I think what he did in terms of establishing himself as a Jokic ball guy that Jokic loves playing with, I think that to me lifted him up into the improved category, because I tend to fall along the more side of, have you earned the trust for a bigger role from your staff, and have you done better in that role? And to me, he's done that.
I think Christian's a very deserving choice. He honestly, like, again, I think he's probably would wind up being maybe top 3 for me on this list. Couple of quibbles. One, you know that Adam Mares likes him because he's willing to give somebody else credit on the Nuggets besides Jokic for anything. 2, I will say this, that based off of your paradigm, maybe you should back off a bit. And the reason I say that is Christian Braun is ownership's choice. It was a big reason that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was not only not retained, but not called. Like the idea of there being like, well, they tried to make it. Nope. They were just like, thanks. That was it. Mm-hmm. There was not like, I don't even think there was an appropriate level of communication given to KCP, given his contributions and his standing as a veteran in the league. Mm-hmm. Because ownership is like Christian. Yeah. Anointed the guy. And he's one of the only guys that ownership, management, coaching, locker room all agree on.
Yeah.
And that's because he's really good, and he's a really, like, he is such a professional. Christian's just like, he's such a hard worker and he's such a professional. I've tried 17 different times this season to try and get him to take credit for how much better his finishing is, because he finishes through blocks, through contact, off balance, doesn't off of a not clean catch if the pass isn't great. He still finishes it, and he's constantly like, gotta give credit to Big Fella and Jamal and those guys. That's it. Every single time because he knows where the money comes from. I will also say this, though. He's second in the league in fast break points per game.
Mm-hmm.
It's Giannis and then him.
Yeah.
The vast majority of it is he runs off of any miss.
Yeah.
That is his job.
Yeah.
But that's what he's doing. I will also say he was brought in to be like the defensive stopgap to make sure the defense didn't fall off enough. And I will say, especially the first 3 months of the season, he was not only not as good as KCP, but he was worse than himself last year because of the amount of offensive workload he was taking on.
Used to that.
And like, there's a reason for that, but he got worse. One thing I will say though, in season, go look at how Christian was doing in screen navigation the first month of the season, or second, even if you want to give him some time, like December, and then look at him now, because he's gotten so much better at it.
Yeah.
Like, I was like screaming to the heavens. I was like, the Nuggets don't have a single guy that can get over a screen. And Christian's been terrific the last like 2 months of the season because he's put the work in on that side. He's, I think, very deserving, but a lot of the offensive stuff is actually more juiced by Jokic. And I'm usually the guy that goes the other way and is like, other guys can be good too. But in this case, I do think that Jokic is juicing him quite a bit.
Yeah. All right, next one, sixth man of the year. This is also, the definition determines like how you were going to go on this.
Yep.
And normally in the league, it has always gone to one of the best teams, doesn't have to be the best, but one of the best teams with one of the highest scoring guys off the bench. And that's pretty much where we're at this year. There's an outlier, I guess, a few outliers, but sixth man of the year, runaway favorite right now, Peyton Pritchard, minus 900, Malik Beasley, plus 470, Russell Westbrook, plus 4,000, DeAndre Hunter, plus 7,500, and Ty Jerome, plus 20,000. Where do you side on this? And I will give you the two favorites. Beasley leading the league, 295 made threes, first in the league. Pritchard, 14, 3.8, 3.3, shooting 41% from three with 7.9 attempts per game. Where you fall on this argument?
I think you can make a great argument for any of these guys except Peyton Pritchard. As long as it's not Peyton Pritchard, any of these guys I think is a great choice. I fall honestly on Ty Jerome.
Okay.
I really think that this isn't getting like the work isn't being done enough on this.
Ty Jerome, Danny Green All-Star. Absolutely.
Such a great initiator for an elite offense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like you don't get to see it because of how much firepower they have. The effectiveness, the overall performance, like he is a spark that leads them a lot of the time when the starters are struggling. And that's so important. Naz Reid probably deserves more consideration because there are still a lot of games when it's like, man, the Wolves would have been sunk if not for Naz.
That dude can hoop.
And so I think actually Naz, much like Rudy Gobert, is like just being like, well, old news. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, man. Naz is third in scoring off the bench and has been phenomenal for a team that is like way better than their record and is a legitimate threat in the Western Conference. That seems important to me.
Do you think we'll ever see the volume of like Lou Williams and Herro winning it like that? Or is this kind of like, as you say, with the narrative of the MVP? Do you think this is kind of like once you win sixth man of the year, like everybody's kind of said, like you should be a starter. And if you're still on the bench, like I'm really sorry, but like we got to go a different direction.
No, we'll still give guys, if they're in the Lou Williams mold, there'll still be guys that win this.
Okay.
That are just like, if you can just, this is what's been weird is like there hasn't been the last couple of seasons, just like the microwave bench guy.
Okay.
Like that guy just hasn't existed. And if there had been, then he would probably be the runaway guy just because like it's such a real challenge, I think, for the voters if they consider these things in any sort of meaningful way, which many of them don't. Some of them do though. And I think that challenge I think is really significant.
Can I tell you who I'm going with?
Who?
Peyton Pritchard.
God, come on, man.
Look, there's something about me as a traditionalist when it comes to this award. I'm not going against what the award is. Now, I could think it's something different than that, but the award is, I'm picking who my sixth man of the year is, and the award is defined by one of the best bench scorers off one of the best teams. And
then why isn't DeAndre Hunter who leads in scoring?
Because so many of those buckets were compiled as either a starter or Atlanta. Like it's too hard to parcel out like this was your role in one place is a different role here. And so I can't do it. I just can't do it. You play for two.
Pritch is at 14 points per game.
Yes. And 28 minutes. And there's something about what he brings to their team in terms of not allowing fall off. Their starting lineup, plus 10 net, right? Pritchard on the bench, they're plus 10 net. Pritchard in the game, they're plus 9 net. Like, to get that, to be able to say like we can go 6 guys deep, right? When he's on the court and do that, I think that's a big deal. He's top 10 in pick and roll points per direct for second spectrum. Like, that matters to me. He's also one of those guys that can shoot off every different type of shot profile, whether it's off ball, ISO, pick and roll, DHO, or spot up. Like, that matters to me. And to me, there's just a little, not enough of Ty Jerome where I feel like I think it works, but I don't think it's like one of those things that's sustainable. And that to me also matters, like, is what you're doing in the regular season. And I know you always say these are.
Come now.
I know you always say
can't
these
seriously bring me Peyton Pritchard for a playoff. Come on.
What
now.
he does here will be fine and translate to the playoffs. And so to me, that's where I side.
Here's my thing with Pritch.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers, like, if we remove context, I think there's a very good case for him. Like, us, if we're just like, hey, look, we're not just talking about scoring, he's a better playmaker than these other guys.
Yeah.
And I have to be like, yeah, you're right. And then it's like overall impact, like, how's the offense performed? Yeah, you're right. My problem is just like, look, let's just be really honest about what the Celtics are. They're a 3-point math contraption, and that's fine. They've won a title that way. They went even harder this year.
Yeah.
They are so far into the gimmick they can't see themselves. This is some Andy Kaufman that they're on. Like, it is just, we're not going to let you take threes. We're going to take a bunch of threes. That's it. That's all it is. There's nothing else. And if you're like, yeah, and that's why they win, and Peyton hits a bunch of them, sure. But they have force-fed him so much to get him this award. From the very beginning, we were on this. He plays in all of these situations where he should not be on the floor. And the answer is like, well, yeah, they're resting the starters. And so he's leading the bench unit. Most 6 men, it's like, Naz Reid isn't playing in these blowouts, chucking them up. But there's Peyton Pritchard out there getting them 3-pointers up, going off for 40 when everybody's sitting, because it's all like a very contrived, and they've said this, they want to get him 6 man of the year because they love him, and that's great. You can't play him in the conference finals. Come on. Like, they're gonna have to. Is not like, and here's the thing is, like, the Pistons would have to play Malik Beasley in the conference finals, and it would go badly because Malik's got a lot of flaws as a player. I just can't reward the kind of contraptionism that it takes for Peyton Pritchard to be this award winner.
Interesting.
Versus the other guys who I feel like it is a lot more authentic and natural. This to me feels like we have invented this entire system and this one particular guy. And I'll say I'm mad at the rest of the league for not being diligent enough in their game planning to be like, hey, what if we play Peyton Pritchard off the floor? Like, what if we just, like, put him in every pick and roll and attacked him so consistently, either with pick and roll or off ball cutting with bigger guys off of these switches to make him unviable? Nobody does it because it's too much work in the regular season to game plan like that. And it makes me livid because I got good guys like you sticking up for Peyton Pritchard for 6 man of the year.
Oh, man. All right. We'll leave Peyton there. My favorite one, executive of the year. This one to me is super interesting. It's only by the GMs that vote it. And I try to think, like, do you think defining the award is a big deal? So, like, I thought about, like, are you judged by the best team being put on the floor? Are you judged by the best moves being made during this year, whether it's draft, trades in the offseason, or trades at the deadline? Or are you judged by, like, the financial gymnastics you do with your current situation and, like, how you make that work on the court as well? And, like, obviously all those things matter, but what do you weigh even more? So I just thought about maybe, like, guys in the mix: Trajan Langdon, Sam Presti, Michael Wenger, Rob Pelinka. Like, there's a ton of guys. Like, whoever gets the number one pick, I'm sure, for if Utah gets it, like, that's also executive of the year stuff. We gave ourselves the best odds. Like, however you parcel out is, like, interesting. I know who I end up with. Where are you at on this?
If Cade wasn't as good as he is, I would go with Trajan Langdon.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my pick.
Okay.
But it's like, Cade makes it very difficult to go past this. This is also an award that typically gets rewarded after a couple of years where it's like they already did the work and then it happens and they're like, it's XOY.
Yeah.
I just think you got to go with Sam Presti. I just think that you have to go with Sam Presti. If not for the reality is, if we look at the entire, all the things that you talked about, there's nobody in Sam's class right now. Nobody has,
Yep.
like, if we were just like, forget the on-court performance, who is best set up financially and draft assets wise? Oh, it's Oklahoma City. If we look at who has the best team on the court, it's Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
Who added the most meaningful free agents this summer? Oh, it's Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Like adding Alex Caruso for essentially nothing. Adding, well, I guess you're right. Josh has been much better over the last 2 months. He's been really good. Adding Hartenstein, beating out everybody else, and getting him to commit to buy into the program. But for me, it's like, look, if you're up close, if you have any proximity to OKC, you learn what makes them great, and it's the program.
Yeah.
And it's not just coaching or player development. It is arena staff, concessions. It is financial. It's business side. It is everything. And Presti's at the helm of that.
Yeah.
Like his commitment to doing things the right way is above and beyond, and his attention to detail. So for me, it's got to be Sam. I think Trajan is I think Langdon is absolutely deserving because, like, hey, we're not just going to stick with this young core. We're not just going to let these guys die on the vine. We lost 28 games in a row last year. This franchise needs to take a step forward, and Cade has shown he's ready. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get Tobias Harris because I know he's a vet. That even though everybody's like, oh, so overrated, overpaid. Yeah, you know what Tobias is? He's an absolute professional that's going to help you win games. Doing the same thing with Tim Hardaway Jr. A guy is like, yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr. is not like a guy probably that starts for a title team. You know what he's very helpful for? A young team learning how to win.
Yeah.
Ron Holland, great draft pick. Absolutely phenomenal draft pick. So all the way down, I think it's got to be Trajan or Sam, and I'll go with Sam.
Yeah. So both of them I'm all good with. I think that they've had phenomenal runs. What you said, you know, the guys that Langdon brought in, availability is such a big deal because I talked about this with Bryce Simmons, and you can come to the bench and have a vet talk to you and be like, oh, this and that. But when a guy's on the court with you, showing you or talking you through an action or something like that, that's how you're going to actually grow. So I could see that. And my answer earlier in the year would have been Sam Presti. What they've built is an absolute machine. He's at the head of it. You're right. They have my coach of the year and Mark Daigneault. He's incredible. He would have been my pick, but I can be swung by a Black Swan event. And there is no doubt in my mind that the executive of the year is Rob Pelinka. And it's not,
come on.
It's not even close. It is.
He walked into a coffee shop, man.
Yes, but he got an absolutely generational player for below market value in a pocket listing before this player even hit the market and anybody knew about it. And there is something to be said about where they were at, where they were set up to be, and what the future looked like. And the future looks very different now. And so whether he just walked into a coffee shop or whether he pulled some Mamba magic on Nico and sprinkled it in, whatever it was, like he kept this thing so tight for a month in Nico's mind, a month and a half, whatever it was. And you can't tell me that he didn't go get Dorian Finney-Smith thinking, all right, I'm going to get Luka no matter what the cost of this. And I want to have the pieces in place before it.
All right, here's a question. Other guys have had to trade a franchise star like Paul George before.
Are you
not many of them have had the
just so I know, like you're putting Paul George and Luka in the same.
Nope.
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to clarify before you.
Yeah, no, okay. Not at all. Not many have had the foresight to acquire a player like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and have the idea of what he was capable of in that deal, along with the draft compensation, right? So it's like Sam had to do something that like everybody has to do. Rob had to do something that no one has to do, which is say yes when Nico Harrison says, would it be okay if we got AD for Luka? And like the Dorian Finney-Smith thing was like a really good trade. I think it was, and getting rid of D'Lo was all for it. Like, yeah, really good move. They outmaneuvered Memphis so badly on that Memphis, to my understanding, is still mad about it. Memphis thought they were goal line on Dorian Finney-Smith, and they thought they were goal line on Cam Johnson, and that screwed him twice. I get it from the they got like he got Luka. It's just that we know from the reporting around it, we have enough information to know, like, who's more responsible for the success, Rob Pelinka in getting Luka or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to the Thunder's defense? And the answer is like Nikola Topic to the Thunder defense is more contributory. The man walked into a
I
coffee shop.
understand. I understand. It doesn't move me either way. Like the fact is he still has them. And to me it doesn't have to be as
But
complicated.
I'll tell you this: giving him XOY would validate the concept of Lakers exceptionalism, of just like you're better than everybody else.
He can't help it. Like just like you said, like giving him the award, I can't help that all he had to do was walk into the coffee shop, because at the end of the day, Luka is a Laker, and
how do you screw that up though? Like, how do you make a mistake with that?
well, you do something along the way in terms of letting it out, letting Nico feel any type of way of like, maybe I need to run this bypass somebody. You give any indication that like your bond isn't as strong as Nico believes it to be in terms of you guys are boys. I don't know. I would find it hard that they'd be able to like talk again, but it seems like Nico is like all in on like this works and like no problem. Like he has a vision. That's his right to have a vision and in terms of how he wants to run it. But like at some point, it's a make or miss league. And that's a big make for Rob. And I can't go process in terms of how he got it, because he got it. And so for this,
you want to know what the reward for the results is? It's having Luka Doncic. You don't have to give him an award on top of it.
I have to. I'm sorry.
He gets to keep his job.
I'm sorry.
When he had mismanaged the roster and relationship with Clutch Sports and had frustrated the franchise beyond all belief.
I know.
And he gets to walk out smelling like roses.
Roses.
Because Nico Harrison walked into a coffee shop.
Absolutely. I know. Life's not fair. God bless Rob. All right, Matt Moore, thank you so much for popping in. This has been an absolute blast. Award season, we went through my 4 favorite ones: MVP, MIP, Sixth Man of the Year, Executive of the Year, a snapshot of the league for the years to come. Read everything you write. How do we say it? Hardwood Paxum? Did I get it?
Hardwood Paroxysm is how
Hardwood Paroxysm on Substack, the Action Network, Locked On NBA. You're everywhere. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.